We're continuing our discussion of logic from Chapter 3. Today in Section 3.2, we're looking at compound statements and connectives. And I have to tell you that this is probably one of the most important sections in this chapter because you will need it when you start doing truth tables. The objectives: express compound statements in symbolic form, express symbolic statements with parentheses in English, and use the dominance of connectives. Simple statements convey one idea with no connecting words. Compound statements combine two or more simple statements using connectives. Connectives are words used to join simple statements, and examples are and, or, if then, and, if, and only if. First, we're going to look at and statements. If P and Q are two simple statements, then the compound statement P and Q is symbolized by P, a little caret pointing upward, Q. The compound statement formed by connecting statements with the word and is called a conjunction, similar to what you have learned in English, and the symbol for and is a little caret pointing upward. Here's an example of translating from English to symbolic form. We're going to let P and Q represent two simple statements. P is, it is after 5 p.m., and Q is, they are working. So we're going to write each compound statement below in symbolic terms. It is after 5 p.m., and they are working. So if P is, it is after 5 p.m., we're going to have P, and is a little caret, and then they are working is Q. It is after 5 p.m. and they are not working. So we're going to have P and, but we've got the negation of Q this time, which we covered in the previous section. Common English expressions for P caret, that's the little arrow pointing upwards, Q. Okay, the symbolic statement is the same in the first column. An English statement would be P and Q. Using the same P and Q we did on the previous slide, we have it is after 5 p.m. and they are working. You can also use the word but rather than and. It is after 5 p.m., but they are working. P yet Q. It is after 5 p.m., yet they are working. P nevertheless Q. It is after 5 p.m., nevertheless they are working. But the symbolic statement is the same in each case. These are just different ways of stating the same thing in English. The connective or can mean two different things. Consider this statement: I visited London or Paris. This statement can mean exclusive or, I visited London or Paris, but not both. Or it can also mean the inclusive or, I visited London or Paris or both. Disjunction is a compound statement formed using the inclusive or represented by the symbol, the caret that is pointing downward. So P or Q or both is symbolized by P, caret pointing downward, Q. This is read as or. Example 2, translating from English to symbolic form. We're going to have two different P's and Q's this time. P is the bill receives majority approval, and Q is the bill becomes a law. So for A, we're going to write in symbolic form the bill receives majority approval or the bill becomes a law. So in symbolic form, it would be P, caret pointing downward, Q. That's P or Q. For B, the bill receives majority approval or the bill does not become a law. Well, this time Q is negated, and so it's going to be P, caret pointing downward, not Q. If-then statements. The diagram on the right side of the slide shows a relationship that can be expressed three ways. All poets are writers, because poets are inside the circle, including writers. There are no poets that are not writers, because again, poet circle is totally inside the writer circle. Or, if a person is a poet, then the person is a writer. All those mean the same thing, if, then. The compound statement, if P then Q, is symbolized by P with an arrow pointing toward the Q, and this is called a conditional statement. The statement before the arrow is the antecedent, anti means preceding, and the statement after the arrow is called the consequent. Example 3, translating from English to symbolic form. We're going to have different P's and Q's again. Let P be the statement, a person is a father, and Q be a statement, a person is a male. So we're going to write each compound statement below in symbolic form. If a person is a father, then that person is a male. So we've got if, then. If a person is a father, that would be P, then the arrow, that person is a male, Q. Okay, using this P, a person is a father, and Q, a person is a male. If a person is not a male, then that person is not a father. Again, this is an if, then. If a person is not a male, so we're talking about Q, but we're talking about the negative of Q, or negation of Q, then, with the arrow, that person is not a father, that would be the negation of P. Common English expressions for P, rightward pointing arrow, Q. So again, in this table, the symbolic statement is the same, but the English statements can be read a little differently. For the first line, if P, then Q. Going back to P, a person is a father, and Q, a person is a male. If a person is a father, then that person is a male. That one's pretty straightforward. The next line, Q, if P. A person is a male, so we're putting Q first, if that person is a father. So that would be P. Third line, P is sufficient for Q. In English, being a father, P, is sufficient for being a male, Q. Okay, in the fourth line, they've reversed it again. Q is necessary for P. Being a male, which is Q, is necessary for being a father, P. Next line, P only if Q. A person is a father, that is the P statement, only if that person is a male, that's the Q part. And finally, only if Q, P. So in English, only if a person is a male is that person a father. So again, the symbolic statement is the same, but the English statement can be worded a little differently and still mean the same thing. If and only if statements. We had if then, and now these are if and only if. Biconditional statements are conditional statements that are true if the statement is still true when the antecedent, the first part, and the consequent, the second part, are reversed. If a person is a father, then that person is a male. Okay, that's true. So we're going to reverse these. If a person is a male, that's the Q part, then that person is a father. That is not necessarily true. Okay, going down to the next line. If a person is an unmarried male, then that person is a bachelor. That is true. If a person is a bachelor, then that person is an unmarried male. Also true. So the bottom ones are both true, even when the antecedent and the consequent are reversed. The compound statement P if and only if Q, which is abbreviated as IFF, is symbolized by the arrow going both directions. Again, we're going to look at a table showing common English expressions for P double-pointed arrow Q. The symbolic statement is the same, but the English statements can be different. P if and only if Q, and we're using P, a person is an unmarried male, and Q, a person is a bachelor. A person is an unmarried male if and only if that person is a bachelor. Now we're reversing things. Q if and only if P. A person is a bachelor if and only if that person is an unmarried male. And then we get a little more complicated. If P, then Q, and if Q, then P. If a person is an unmarried male, then that person is a bachelor. And if a person is a bachelor, then that person is an unmarried male. They combined the first line and the second line. Next, P is necessary and sufficient for Q. Being an unmarried male is necessary and sufficient for being a bachelor. And finally, Q is necessary and sufficient for P. Being a bachelor is necessary and sufficient for being an unmarried male. So we're going to review the different statements of symbolic logic that we just talked about. The negation in symbolic form is a little wavy line before the letter. And the common English translations, not P. It is not true that P. Conjunction is the and. P and Q, P but Q. Disjunction, P or Q. Conditional, if P, then Q. P is sufficient for Q, Q is necessary for P. Biconditional, which we just looked at. P if and only if Q, P is necessary and sufficient for Q. Now we're going to an example. We want to express symbolic statements with and without parentheses in English, and you'll see why in a minute. We're going to let P represent she is wealthy and Q, she is happy. We want to write each of these symbolic statements in words. And the symbols are bad in this on this screen. This is supposed to be P with the or Q. I think that's what they mean. It is not true that she is wealthy and happy. For B, she is not wealthy and she is happy. And C, she is neither wealthy nor happy. Literally, it is not true that she is either wealthy or happy. I'm sorry about the symbols. I didn't notice until just now that it's supposed to be the V pointing down. Okay, these are good. I don't understand. Anyhow, expressing symbolic statements with parentheses in English. So these are getting a little more complicated, which will happen when you start working with truth tables. Okay, notice that these symbolic statements include parentheses, and it makes a difference as to where the parentheses are. So in the first line, the statements to group together are the Q and, not P. And so this is read as if Q and not P, then, which is the right arrow, not R. For the bottom one, we're grouping together the last two statements. So this one would say Q and, if not P, then not R. So notice that when we translate these symbolic statements into English, these simple statements in parentheses appear on the same side of the comma, which you can see in the last column of the table. Example 5, expressing symbolic statements with parentheses in English. And again, we've got the weird symbols. Okay, we're letting P be a student misses lecture, Q, a student studies, and R, a student fails. So we want to write these symbolic statements in words. Okay, you can tell by some of this that it is a matter of grouping because we've got the parentheses. So the English statement would be, if a student studies and does not miss lecture, then the student does not fail. So there should be the caret and the not for P inside the parentheses, and then the part outside the parentheses should be the arrow pointing to the right. Okay, we're changing this up just a little bit. P is a student misses a lecture, Q a student studies, and R a student fails. We want to write it in words. So this time, the parentheses are around the last part of the combined statement. So a student studies is Q, and then we've got and. Now we've got the parentheses part. If the student does not miss lecture, that's going to be a not P, then the student does not fail, which would be not R. We have to talk about dominance of connectives. If a symbolic statement appears without parentheses, you've got to have some rules for how those will be interpreted. Statements before and after the most dominant connective should be grouped. And now we're going to look at the dominance of connectives used in symbolic logic in a particular order. So negation is the least dominant. Conjunction, disjunction, the carets, are the same level of dominance. Conditional, but the most dominant is the biconditional. Okay, so this chart kind of summarizes all of this. You see that none of these have the parentheses until you get to the third column. So it's like when you're performing "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally" and things like that. If you don't have parentheses, you have to have a certain way of interpreting the statement. So for the first line, we see that the most dominant connective, it says it's highlighted in red, but it isn't. Okay, so statements meaning clarified with grouping symbols. We are grouping the and this is conditional. Okay, the next line, instead of having the conditional first and then the and, we've got the conditional. And so you can see that the grouping symbols are going with the P and the Q. Okay, the next one is biconditional. So you can see by the grouping symbols that the Q, if Q then R, are inside the parentheses. The next one is also a biconditional. And this time it's going to be the opposite of the one above it because of the dominance. And the final one, there is nothing in the type of statement because it's ambiguous. We don't really know because these had the same equality. On some of these slides that have issues with the symbols, you can always look at the tables in the book. These same tables are in the chapter in the book. And we're going to have the same problem with these last two slides. So I'm going to recommend that you look at the book for these rather than me try to explain this, because it's going to get a little confusing because these symbols do not look like they should. Again, I apologize. But that does conclude our discussion of this section.